Okay, I'm sure I will be joined by some folks here. And today is the 6th of day is the 6th of September, and we'll have a few logistical issues to discuss, and then we will get into the meat of the session, and we'll talk about what's going on there. So I will be right back here in just a moment. And as of yet, I haven't had anybody join, but it's 1:55. And since this is recorded, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And again, it is a virtual session, and we'll talk real briefly about what's going on with it. And in this course, now we've had some strange kinds of scheduling issues, and so I want to talk about them. This class is set up to be a hybrid class. It's set up to be with live ground-based class sessions on Mondays and then virtual Wednesdays. Okay. Now here's what happened. Of course, the first week of class was Monday, the 21st of August, and that, of course, the class didn't start till the 24th. Secondly, the 28th of August, I think we were able to have class, and I had some doctor's things, but then of course, then Monday the 4th, this last Monday, was Labor Day, so we didn't have any class whatsoever, and I see a couple of people joining, and so starting next week we will be able to hold the conventional schedule we were going to have, and that is Monday we'll meet in class. Okay, it'll be over there in BBC, the Bailey Business Center in the lab, and that'll be the ground-based part of this hybrid course. And then Wednesdays will be virtual, but we've had these scheduling things which have kind of prevented that, so that everybody will know what's going on as far as that goes. And I want to take just a minute also to kind of keep us on track in terms of where we're headed with things. Okay, and the syllabus section of Canvas will walk us through, okay, on what we've got going on. And today at 2, we had this assignment was due, and then the Loudon Chapter 2 quiz. I want to mention something about these, and let me go to the student setting, to the student view, so you'll see the same thing I do. So I'll see the same thing you do. Let me put it like that. On these exams, you need to make certain that if it says 2 attempts within 40 minutes, or 1 attempt within unlimited time, that you pay attention to that. Okay. Because when you submit items in, it's going to submit them. So unless it has multiple attempts, you just simply need to do the exam and then submit it. You have when you have unlimited time, these are some contractual things that have to do with the publishers who allow us to take these exams and quizzes and put them online. And typically, if you have something happen or if you're late, I let you take the exam or redo it after it's due. Okay. Now you'll also need to see in my syllabus about my late policy. I'm pretty forgiving on things, but frankly, if someone becomes an issue, what I do is the first one is half credit, and from there on it becomes a 0. So I want to make sure everybody understands. These exams, you need to pay attention to when they're due, and how much time you have on them and how many attempts. They are open book, open note. Okay, so I don't know, you know, what that, how that would throw anybody. And then each week, and then again, this is just some navigational stuff. When you come in, you'll see this section on the modules. Okay, and that's really where we are here. All right, and we're over here at this week. Okay, we talked about the case follow-ups with Home Depot, and here today we have this exam that was due at 2 o'clock, the Loudon Chapter 2, and this is basically the this is that case follow-up. Should a computer grade your essay? So I want people to take a look at that as well. And one of the things I'm probably going to do is to reinforce some of the concepts in the text, is to go ahead and talk about some of the things that are in that chapter. So this is recorded, all right, and for those who are not here, as you listen to the recording, please make sure you understand something, that next Monday I'll be in class, okay, physically, and then we'll be into that mode that we were supposed to. But remember, the 21st, the 28th, and the 4th, we kind of got blown out of the water. And one of the things I like to do is to take you through some of the different kinds of things that I think in the chapters are very important. And in addition, talk some about your responses on cases and that type of thing. Now, I want to go over here for just a moment, and I'm going to go back to the files section. Okay, and this is just to kind of keep everybody on the anything. And let's see who else here. Glad to see you, Libby, and Brian. Glad to see you as well. And again, whatever you might have missed, if you came in, I started a little early, don't worry, you can go back, and it's a video, so you can go back and play what you missed. I want to look at the syllabus for just a moment, okay, and talk about it, because there's a text, the textbooks for the course, so there are not any big surprises. There are 2 textbooks that are required for this course. The first one is the Loudon text, and that's the one that we're getting the exams out of, and it's pretty much the gold standard in MIS. The only thing that we don't have in this is the MIS lab, but that adds about another $200 on the cost of the book. So I kind of said no on that. And the second is a text on the hypersocial organization, and that's a very important text talking about how folks are trying to come to grips with these social media and how to use them as a business tool, or at the very least use them to collect information for business intelligence purposes. And ultimately, an MIS is designed really to do 2 things. One, augment the operations of a company, and number 2, to help that company figure out what's going on in the outside world. So this book on the hypersocial organization is a very, very important one. And in fact, this week, and I'll pop back over here to the modules, okay, this week, chapter 2 in Loudon talks about global e-business, collaboration, social networking, and that type of thing. And one of the reasons that I've decided, and I vocalized some of this in a long-winded email I sent to everybody, one of the reasons I've decided to take these courses and make them hybrid is because you're going to increasingly be out there in a world where you're working remote, or you're working with customers who are remote, or you're working with maybe people in the supply chain who are remote, or you're going to have a whole lot of social media activity going on where there'll be remote interactions. And so I really felt like it's nonsensical to have a course in MIS in this day and age and not put you in that environment. Okay, so a piece of this is understanding all of that. And I know that there may be some of you who maybe took classes online, some of you who maybe even went to, I think Oklahoma has an online high school. Maybe you've had some online courses before, and they come in all shapes, forms, and varieties. But this hybrid approach is one that I've decided to try. And so it puts a lot of the onus on all of you, okay, to stay focused, to stay current, etc. The second chapter in Loudon, and I'm just going to kind of walk you through it, and then I'm going to pop out to the New York Times and the LA Times and talk about some of the practical things that are out there. One of the things that an MIS focuses upon are transaction systems, okay? And transaction systems are things that involve me paying somebody, somebody paying me taking inventory or resources or money internally and transferring them from one unit or one workstation to another, okay? And so transaction systems follow a flow. And they're over on page 47 in the textbook. The authors show you a payroll transaction processing system, okay? And it's designed to be a system, so it's not a silo. So what do you mean by that? Well, one of the things that we've learned in business is that you cannot have marketing, accounting, IT, operations or production, or every operating in a silo and not connected with the rest of the company. We've learned it's very difficult, particularly in large conglomerate firms, that have a company like Procter & Gamble handle thousands of products and is several companies all layered together, and getting that all fitted and getting them and working together is a great challenge. And we know, for example, in mergers and acquisitions, that about 80% of them fail because of cultural issues or issues in terms of just meshing the systems. And so page 47 there shows you a payroll transaction processing system, okay? And it walks you through the data that's needed and how that system works, and then the outputs of that system. And that's pretty typical. And then over on page 48, they give you how information systems obtain their data from the organization's TPS, and this is how they harvest all the data from those systems to engage in what we call enterprise computing, or what we call working at the dashboard or business intelligence level. And if you have your textbook with you, or you'll want to make a note if you don't, page 48, go left to right and you'll see, okay, that things just keep getting condensed down. And what happens is you end up at that dashboard level, okay, with management. They have reports that then they have a dashboard that feeds those reports, and that's where they focus upon what we call the KPI, and that is the key performance indicators. What is it that we have to know day in and day out? Okay, now to give you a good example of that, President of the United States, and probably every CEO of every major corporation, but certainly the President of the United States, every single day gets what they call a security briefing, and he's told about everything that's happened the day before. What are the satellites telling us? What are the intelligence people telling us? What's going on in the world? Where are their threats? So that he's aware of that and understands what's going on, so they don't get too blindsided. Now, over there on page 49, they show you a sample MIS report, okay? And this is a report that one would call a comparative report, where we look at sales, okay, that are planned versus sales, the actual sales, and those are divided out by sales, by product description, okay, and then it looks like by salesperson. Here's the point, okay. The key performance indicator in that case, in that situation, is how much are we selling, okay, and versus what we planned, because what they planned is probably how they determined the budget for the company's expenses. And so if they're running at 85% of planned income, okay, then they've got to make some adjustments. My church does this, and it's interesting because when I look in the church bulletin, and I know this is how they do budgeting, because I'll look in the church bulletin and it will show planned giving for that point in the year versus actual giving, okay? And thank goodness they're always, the actual giving is below the planned giving and the actual giving. There's not much of a gap there at all, okay? In fact, usually the actual giving is less, the actual giving is more than the planned giving. So they do a pretty good job with their budgeting. And this could be any one of a number of things. But the whole point of it is that these information systems are designed to give us information to make decisions. But they're also designed to help us collaborate, okay? And if you go back for a moment and you take a look there, and when you see it on page 48 and figure 2.3, what you're going to see is that a whole bunch of different systems have to mesh together. And so we have to collaborate. And so these systems are designed to assist us in handling transactions. They're also designed to help us collaborate. Now, let me encourage you, if you have a phone on, okay, go ahead and put it on mute. Or if you have a question, I'm happy to stop and take a question. Does somebody have a question? Okay. What I'll do then is I'll go ahead and mute those, and we'll go from there. If you have a question, you can always use the little chat function there and raise your hand to get my attention. But again, this leads us over there to page 53, where they talk about the enterprise applications. And over on page 52, they show you some dashboards, okay, and what a digital dashboard is supposed to do. And you'll notice something, that they're very iconic. And what I mean is they look like a dashboard. It's not just a bunch of tables and things of that nature. So yeah, chapter 2 is very important. And over in figure 2.6, they show you the enterprise application architecture and how all of those things fit together to create a knowledge management system, and the interfaces that have to occur, okay, to pull that whole thing together. So that's some good things for you to take a look at, and I think that it's important. Over on figure 2.7, page 60, they show the requirements for collaboration, and that the quality of collaboration has a lot to do with firm performance. Now, all of you who are taking this course, you're of the generation, okay, that you have all of these different platforms, and those are just kind of second nature to you. You're used to them. And one of the things that's important to understand about MIS is that the tools of MIS, the platforms, those kinds of things, often are for one group or generation of employees, or one certain type of employees, they may have or may not have a certain comfort level with them. But if you go through and you start to, if you look at that list, the collaborative technologies are available: email and instant messaging, wikis, virtual worlds. We're doing virtual meeting systems, cloud collaboration services. We store stuff like on a Google Drive. Microsoft SharePoint is another one. The author lists all of those tools, okay? And things like IBM, I mean, those are just the big ones, the ones that everybody knows. There are all kinds of imitators, all kinds of, all types of knockoff products. One of them that we use at OBU, okay, is what we call a virtual private network, a VPN. And a VPN basically is you're trunked into the internet, but enveloped around the flow of the data is cryptology that prevents somebody from looking at the data. And we do this to keep data security at the highest level possible in the school. So we try to do that. And now you could see, for example, we had somebody pop up a minute ago with their video, which is fine. Okay, that's wonderful. I don't pop up with mine for a very simple reason. It's bandwidth. Okay. And the more, and I've been in video conferences where people are discussing and talking and all that business, and it can burn up a lot of bandwidth. You have to have a very robust type of product to do it. I took a course this summer where we worked on one. It's called Shindig, and it's a video conferencing, and the host can host up to 50 rooms of 20 people each, and they can. They can have 2 or 3 people presenting at one time, and all kinds of bells and whistles, far in advance of what we've got here. And there are also things like virtual presence, and I mentioned that before. A lot of the firms in Silicon Valley, their employees work outside of California because they can't afford. There's just simply no housing there. So this chapter dealing with social business and these tools, I think it's really summarized and the authors really do a good job over there on page 64, where they talk about the time, space, collaboration, and social tool matrix, and that is the types of interactions that we want to be able to do. Okay. Now, I know that there are some of you who use Facebook. Maybe you live stream Facebook. There's some of you who probably are very comfortable using FaceTime, using Instagram, maybe a Skype, okay? It just depends. There are some people who are very uncomfortable and they don't use it, but they will post all kinds of stuff on Facebook. There are other people who use chat functions, okay? And I've seen and worked in situations where just about any one and every one of those have been used. And this tool here, Zoom, is what we're using at the university in order for people to try to communicate. I've held some faculty meetings using this tool as well as classes. But we're really trying to find out, can we use these technologies to do some things like free up some space to reach some people who might not be able, or to help students, particularly student athletes and students who work, to give them some flexibility so that they can look at the recording of the course later in the class a little bit later on. So I didn't want to do a death by PowerPoint by any stretch of the imagination. But I did want to make sure, that you saw that you get a good flavor of all of these systems that are really designed for transaction and for collaboration. Okay, and they're and in the end to just help us do the business to do business on a global scale. And every company, in one way or the other today, does business on a global scale. Even if you're a local restaurant, for example, and you are on Google AdSense, you have used Google AdSense, you're a global business, because everybody in the world is going to be seeing how people, they're going to know about you, because you're going to be there, and they're going to see you through Google Maps, they're going to see pictures, etc. So in many ways, there really are no choices for us in terms of using these systems. There just simply are not. Now, I want to take I always like to kind of take a quick little safari out there, since I can share my screen, and I'll take you over to the New York Times, okay? And I always like to come over and find I always like to come over and find some articles that are useful as far as IT, to help you get a sense of how these tools are used. And I'm going to pop over here for two sections. One is the business section, okay, and over here in the New York Times. And one of these that we're starting to see, it's a fascinating thing, is this notion of self-driving cars. Now, the people who are really interested in this are consumers, are kind of excited. The people who are really focused on this are the people who are in the logistics business. Why? Because if they can get self-driving vehicles, they cut a tremendous amount of cost. Now, my hunch is we're a long way from the point where the autonomous vehicle drives up to your doorstep and the robot drops off your stuff. I think you'll have human drivers in there for the foreseeable future, but it will. But by reducing the fatigue of driving, long haul is also another is something else. Long folks like 18-wheelers. This is another thing where autonomous vehicles or semi-autonomous vehicles are going to be a good play. And those will open up a whole new set of tools for collaborating and for getting data. Again, as these technologies develop, they have to eventually be meshed into collaboration and or transaction processing systems. And one of the most interesting things I've seen that's emerged has been in the payroll, where more and more companies are outsourcing payroll, and where payroll, employees will go to a website and they have all their payroll data there, and they can look at their most recent check, and then they can do a video conference or chat with somebody if they have a question about payroll, which means HR offices can move out of that function and can become more focused on employee training, compliance with laws, employee development, and not mess with those kinds of things. And so, again, as I said before, this course is highly conceptual because it talks about information systems at that highest level. The other pieces that down here, and it was one I wanted to show you very quickly. Is this use of technology, okay, in the fashion industry? And I think you might want to come over and take a look at it. It's got some very interesting article about how they're using it, okay, to get some fashion or get some people in front of everyone that other folks have not been able to. So again, that is important. Now, there's another, and I'm going to pop over to the LA Times for just a minute. Okay, because I want you to take a look. I've got a couple of things over there. And again, the LA Times section. Before I do that, let me pop back to New York Times and let me click on the technology section. Okay, and again, you could see this. Here's an interesting article, and again, part of what we're dealing with now is this issue of what we call the Internet of Things. How do we integrate that into our transaction systems? And here, is an app that helps you, or a luggage tag to help you find your suitcase, to know where it's at, where it's en route. And there are probably some apps out there now that track your suitcase. They'll tell you what terminal it's in, where it's headed to. It's just a matter of time before that occurs, so you can have a sense of how long you're going to wait to get your bag, that type of thing. Again, this is one of these transaction processing systems, and you may not see getting your luggage as a transaction processing system until you show up until you go down to pick up your luggage some point and it's not there. Then you understand it is a transaction system. It's a transaction system between you and the airline, and if you don't get it, it's a bad day. So that's I think a very, very interesting. I thought it was a very interesting article, and it's one of these things that. And now note that the New York Times put this in the personal tech column, okay? But I guarantee you that folks are out there looking at this, okay? And it's just no different than you being able to push an app on your phone and know if a flight's been delayed, okay? So these kinds of we see where there's. I'll stop for a minute. We talk about these systems, okay? It's important to understand that sometimes they'll start on the personal end, personal technologies, okay? Nobody really cared about FaceTime on Apple. Nobody really cared about Skype until everybody started going, wait a minute, we can save $5,000 on a travel expense and just have people simply Skype. Wait a minute, I've got people all over the world. They need to collaborate. And I think I might have mentioned this last time, but maybe if I didn't, I have a good friend I went to high school with, and she got her doctorate in chemistry from Johns Hopkins, and she went on, got an MBA, I think at Harvard or Columbia or somewhere. But she is one of the principals of a venture capital firm that underwrites the development of new pharmaceutical products. Okay, so they're taking big gambles, and her team, okay, is all over the world. They're in just about every time zone. So for them to schedule a meeting becomes, they never can meet face to face because it'd be too expensive. They'd spend $100,000 just getting everybody in one place. So they do a lot of Skype. They've used just about every platform that's out there. And again, this is just how a personal technology kind of melted over to a business use. On the other end, many of you use Google Drive, or you store your stuff. My wife and I, we use Google Drive. We use we use Microsoft's product for that drive. This notion of having a place to store your documents and all of your documents on a cloud was something that originated with business, okay, and then kind of eventually moved itself over into personal use. And so you see these technologies that just kind of one starts with people using it, and then it kind of moves itself over, and vice versa. So That's and typically they are typically going to be centered around transactions, okay, collaboration, and this is one thing I don't think the authors did well enough with, decision making, okay. And you say, well, what do you mean by that? Well, think about it for a moment. You can press on your phone and you can look for pizza places in your zip code. You can go over to Amazon and you can look for, or you can go wherever you shop and look, Trulia, Zula, wherever you shop, and you can find something and order it. Okay, that ability to go out and search for things and find them and make a decision with them was not what the people who invented the internet ever believed it would be. The people who really invented the internet, really started it, thought it was just going to be this thing people could go out and they could just kind of, look at the world. Okay, they just didn't foresee what it would become. In fact, the internet was originally known as DARPANet, and how it originated was back in the 1950s when people were concerned that the United States would engage in a thermonuclear war with what was then the Soviet Union. They designed this entire trunk telephone system that was deep underground, so that government officials and people would be able to communicate with each other. And then they discovered they could send data through that. And then they discovered they could share files of data, and that's just a collection of files. Now, it was only when Tim Berners invented the web page, okay, that we got the World Wide Web, and the rest is history. But these are things that having a kind of a grasp of them, you can understand. And I want to make sure that you kind of see, again, here's one of these that it really is kind of a transaction system, okay? And again, that's just we see these moves from one to the other. Here's another, and this is an app to provide peace of mind with a teenager behind the wheel, okay? This is a vehicle monitoring system. All right, and a location monitoring system that was really developed on the commercial side of things, but has now worked its way over into into personal technology uses. If you have an Android phone, for example, unless you turn off your GPS, your phone tracks everywhere you go. And you can go look at your Google Maps, and you can see your Google timeline, and it will show you everywhere you've been and how long you were there and all of that. That was a commercial application that seeped over into personal applications. So we see those kinds of things there. I want to pop over the LA Times for a minute, okay? And look at some of the things that they've got going on and what they're talking about. And again, you'll want to take a look in some of the sections of them. Here's the business section. All right. And here's one of these where this is an interesting article. This is that United Airlines. This is that situation where the guy was drug off of the plane. Social media, okay? This is how we're seeing this more and more and more. We've seen this with some of these terrible, terrible situations that have occurred in our country with these folks involving the authorities. We see these kinds of things happening. This is an example. All that when people thought when they invented camera phones with a camera and a video recorder, and then there was Facebook and all that. Nobody perceived that this would become a tool, okay, for social change, or it would become a tool for people to take their complaint against a company and it go viral. And I mean out there in front of millions of people, okay? Companies never saw this, and they were never ahead of this curve, so they didn't see it coming. But now you know, they're concerned, and you hear the things, for example, like police officers wearing bodysuits, and I can tell you, it was I guess it's been 4 or 5 years, maybe 6 years now, the so-called what was known as the Arab Spring, where people were communicating, where several countries in the Mideast, Syria, Libya, Egypt, they underwent revolutions, and it was fueled in part because people were using social media to communicate with each other about what was going on, and people were posting videos on Facebook, and they were sending tweets showing the world what was going on, okay? And so these kinds of things, people are trying, organizations trying to get ahead of them. And these really do relate back to chapter 2. This thing, this dragging incident, I guarantee you is going to be in the business, if it's not already, it's going to be in the business case studies for the next 10 years, okay? And you know, one of the things now that employees in those situations, or any of those kinds of are told is, hey, you know, don't become the next internet, don't become the next viral video. Be careful, okay? Because people have phones, they have videos, they'll take pictures, they'll post stuff, and suddenly those things go. The first time that I really saw how powerful this could be was I think it was the winter of 2007, and Twitter was there, but just kind of starting to grow. Facebook was getting some momentum, and then one day I had a Twitter feed, and I noticed this explosion, and there had been really bad weather, and people were extremely upset with the delayed flights, and they were tweeting, and people were attaching photos, and this flight's delayed, and that flight's delayed. And then I started to see the airline companies, some of the airlines, PR people, usually they're first, they respond, and I thought, okay, now we're starting to see, okay, a real sea change. And one of the most interesting things I saw the other day, and it was these, I think they're called Yeezy, and they're they're like sneakers, and they sell for like $3,000 or $4,000 a piece. You guys probably know more about it than I do. And and then they have knockoffs that you can buy. But I looked at that, and I thought, wow, here's a product, and then if you go for a search, you can see reps and knockoffs, and there's there are whole discussion boards around those. Okay. One of the interesting things, and this is related to what we're talking about, has been the advent of what we call open source software and open source products, okay? And one of the most interesting things is that if you go out, you do a search. When I was working a couple of years ago, and I was learning R programming, I was taking some courses on it. I was floored when I saw that there was probably 1,000 help sites where people would say, well, I'm having trouble with this function, or I don't, or this code isn't working, what's wrong? And people would reply. Okay. And you guys probably use this type of thing all the time, but it was just mind-boggling to me. Well, those are collaboration systems out there, okay, that just kind of spring up with open source software. And one of the great challenges for companies, and see, Chapter 2 makes everything look very neat and nice until you realize that employees have all these different devices that they bring. Okay, so it's got to work with an Android, it's got to work with an Apple, it's got to work on a tablet, it's got to work on a desktop, you know, and the website's got to look good no matter what format it's in, and you're talking some real differences in screens and power, etc. So that is one of those things where the authors really try to give you, they stick to their knitting pretty well, just talking about just the sheer business stuff, but all of these kinds of things. And I thought this is a very, very fascinating article, and again, all these ways that people use this, like the video recorders and things. This is got to drive big companies, city governments, and people. It's got to drive them just absolutely bonkers. In terms of some other similar kinds of things, I wanted to take it out and show you for just a real quick. Let's see if I can find it. Here it is. I want to find this if I can find it. Here it is. There's that article. And maybe some of you know more about this. I'm certain you do, about Yeezys. You've heard of it, I guess. But this article talks about the knockoffs and the replicas versus the authentic ones, and how to tell the difference. And so people are out there selling these things for, the knockoffs, selling them for like $500. The real ones are $3,000 or $4,000. Okay, and they're, and I, look, if you know me or taking classes, I'm into sneakers. Okay, and I looked at these and I thought, that's a tall drink of water. The 3,000 ones, whew, that's beyond what I could do. But and some ones are kind of cool looking, and you can go out and do some searches on knockoffs. Okay, and you say, well, what has that got to do? In fact, they even have a video here of Kanye West signing some fake, what they call Red October. You guys probably know more about it. What does it have to do with anything? Well, it's people out there who are taking some intellectual property, okay, and exploiting it from that company. But the firm's trying to kind of rein that type of stuff in. Well, I've gone on here for about 42 minutes or so and talked about what we, talked about this in terms of Chapter 2. I wanted to see if I believe there was one more article, and let me pop us back over to the technology section, okay? And I just wanted to show, okay, one of the most important transaction processing systems that we have, probably the number one, is password. The ability to access data, the ability to access a device, password. And we've come to a point now where I think that by the time you're my age, everything will be driven by some kind of biological tick. That the door will recognize you, the car will recognize you, your computer will recognize you. I think by the time you're my age, your grandkids will laugh at you for carrying keys. They'll think you were just funny. But look, my grandfather used to carry a crank that he'd use to crank up the crankshaft of his Model A so the car would start. So, hey, and I think your grandkids will laugh at you for carrying phones and carrying computers. People just won't have those I don't believe they'll have those types of devices, or if they do, they'll be embedded in clothes, or they'll be so small, but with such capabilities, they'll be almost obsequious. But this notion of passwords is of all of the transaction process. And the authors talk about this over in the security section of the textbook, but this is the this is probably the number one transaction processing system of it all, and that's truly what it is, because it's what gives you access to things. And so, again, I think there's a lot there in chapter 2, but the authors, wanting to stay on schedule and not wanting to get wanting to give you some more practical kinds of things. But I'd say that the main takeaways are this: information systems, okay, and they talk about e-business. Frankly, there's really no such thing as e-business anymore. Everybody's involved in e-business. It's just the extent to which they are. And are they front end? That is, they have a face to the customer, like they have a website. And if they have a website, they probably have somebody who they order, a vendor who they place orders with electronically. So I don't know that, everything is electronic commerce in one way or the other. But certainly, these systems are designed to augment transactions. They're designed to augment collaboration, and that's collaboration between people in the company, or people in the company with customers or suppliers, i.e. stakeholders. And then finally, these systems are designed for decision making, and they're designed to augment those three things in terms of what they're designed to do. So chapter 2 gives you a good look at that. Now, chapter 2 takes something that I think is quite interesting in the Should a Computer Grade Your Essay, and I'm going to be interested to see what everybody had to say, and probably that will be one of the things we'll look at on Monday when we meet, because I think it's going to be interesting to see some of your reactions, and how, and those of you who think, yeah, you should, and those of you who maybe you say it should. It'll be interesting to see what they have to say. Well, folks, listen, we've gone pretty good for 45 minutes, and I've got, and I think that at this point in time, I think we've done pretty well. I am gonna encourage you, okay, to stay on track with things. I have a couple of people down there will write me, gee, I'm behind on the exam. So let's talk for just a moment about what's coming up, okay? Now, next Monday on the 11th, we will meet physically, okay? And then a week from today, the 13th, we'll have a virtual date. So we're going to be now into that schedule we should have been. We'll talk about this. We'll talk about the hands-on project. I'll probably speak some about Loudon Chapter 3, and I'll try to bring in some more examples or things I think that are pertinent to Loudon and Chapter 3. And that Chapter 3 in Loudon, okay, this is the big text, okay, deals with information systems, organizations, and strategies. And these are topics that are near and dear to my heart, and they are extremely important concepts, because right now we're seeing a whole change in retailing, and the business of retailing is being completely transformed by information technologies and by MIS. And so we'll talk about that some, and I'll bring you, we'll look at some examples of that, as well as just this issue of, we're talking about, an autonomous or the use of artificial intelligence to grade your essay, or an augmented intelligence. But we're pretty much I think at a good stopping point. And I'll stop now for a second. If anybody has a question, I'll come over here and let me pop you open, and I'll unmute anybody.
Hey, the door is unlocked. Sam's on his way. Get in your room.
Anybody have a question?
Tame yourself, Louise. Just because Reginald's not in town doesn't mean you get Florence around.
What just happened?
Wait, listen.
Okay, then, Allie, do you have any questions we could try to work with? Brian, how about you? We're going to have some long times when we have to discuss these cases. Erica, any questions?
I don't think so.
Okay, Libby?
No.
Okay. Let's see, we got quite a few of us here. We got Sam, any questions?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Okay, Allie? Wow, we got quite a few of us here. And then Shane, any questions?
No, sir.
Now, I'm just curious, it does, I'm just curious, how many of you are at the lab? Is there any of you at the lab, or any of you at the lab?
No.
Okay,
No,
okay.
no.
Most of you are what, on your phone or on a tablet or your computer?
No, that wasn't me.
So is there anybody over at Bailey Lab today using the computer there? Okay, okay. All right. Well, that takes care of that issue then, and it was pretty much what I perceived. It's not too friendly an environment for working in remote, and it's a shame. They stripped the sound out of there, and they stripped I haven't tried to go there and plug in a pair of earphones to see if I could sit and hear anything, or use it for vocals. So if you're there, you're probably better off just using a computer or whatever. But folks, listen, I appreciate your time, and we'll call it a day for now. And I appreciate all of you who came, because I know you didn't have to, you could just watch the recording. But again, we will meet Monday physically, and then we'll have a virtual Wednesday. Before I go, one final thing. I do send out to everybody virtual office hours. Now let me explain about those. They're just like a video meeting, okay? And if you come into the virtual office, you're there. You can see me. I can answer questions. I can share my desktop if need be. And so it's really the same as if you stop by my office. So if you have something that I can help you with, I'm there, okay? And I have those sessions. They're recorded, and so that you have privacy, okay? If you need it, I can just stop, and then I can just visit with you if you have a question. But if you need to do that, okay, you do have the capacity to get a hold of me. Now, also, there are going to be some times where if you want, if you're having a difficulty with something, send me an email, and I'll try to schedule a time to see it, and then we can go through it. Okay. And again, that's just part of this thing of trying to do this trying to utilize a hybrid method. I have a lot of graduate students who use the virtual office hours. In fact, I keep some in the evening for them, so when they have questions. Anyway, thank you so much, and I'm going to end the meeting, and I'll record this, and we'll go from there, folks. Thanks so much for showing up. I appreciate it, and have a good one.